This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abuel-Salmon from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives and her cat Lucy.
Lucy. Lucy Van Pelt, right?
Yes.
She's named
yes,
that?
exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Well, welcome, Lucy, to the podcast. What's Lucy been driving?
Me crazy. That's what Lucy's been doing.
Excellent. Well, I mean, when you need to get out of the house, you've had Rebecca, you've had a couple of really good cars this week.
I did.
You've been driving nice stuff.
I did. So I had a 2020 Bentley Flying Spur with the first edition package, which is $45,000. And what's actually interesting.
That's for the package, not for the Flying Spur.
Exactly. Right. That's just for the package, for the first edition markings or accoutrements. So we were actually supposed to be in Seattle last week driving on a launch of these vehicles. But of course, that was the first press trip for me personally. That was the first press trip that I got notified that was going to be canceled, which makes sense. It was in Seattle, so that wasn't going to happen. So what they ended up doing was dispersing all the vehicles to different parts of the country. And basically we had to do an at-home ride and drive.
They made a mistake, though.
What a tragedy.
They made a mistake. I did not get mine.
Yeah,
I didn't get mine either. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, I actually got two because the first one, as he's driving it up here, he was only about not even half an hour away. It's like an hour drive for them. He hit a nail and had to turn around and go back, and then they had to re-sanitize the car that I ended up getting. And I'm sorry, I'm totally distracted because my nephew Jake just came in and he's trying to get Lucy out of my office.
Hi, Jake.
Does she have claws?
She does. Of course she has claws.
Yeah, so they have cats have this magical ability to make themselves like 10 pounds heavier when you want them. And if they have the claws, they're like Velcro. That's excellent.
So I have to say, I think he actually got her, but I started using the Amazon app Calm My Cat. And I got to tell you, I don't know if it's just coincidence. It could be totally, what is that? When the placebo effect. But it's been working. So she's been meowing a lot more ever since Linus passed away in January, her brother.
Well, she's
and
lonely,
so
yeah.
She is, I know. So anyway, I'm sorry, but back to the Flying Spur. So yeah, so they had to go back to New Jersey and sanitize a whole new one. So anyway, I ended up getting it later on in the day, which was fine. But obviously it's, this vehicle, it's first of all, it's big. It is a full size 4-door sedan, or it's really a saloon, and designed, for a driver in the front and a passenger in the back, and a very important passenger at that. But Sam, I was actually thinking about you when I was driving it, because we've talked. You and I talked specifically at the Ford Escape launch, but we've talked on this podcast as well, Dan, about the greenhouse, the windows in different vehicles, and how at one point they got so small that visibility was compromised. And this, I got to tell you, in the Flying Spur, the windows are so small that visibility was really difficult. And it's one of the few times that my lack of height really came into play. Jake, when Jake was with me, I would have to ask him when I was making a left-hand turn, because between the mirror and how close I had to sit and how narrow the window is, my visibility was so compromised. It was actually easier to drive at night because I could see headlights in it and such. It was just, it was really, I kept trying to play with the seat. The A-pillar is pretty big, and it is right there. And it was, I took a bunch of pictures that I'll send to you guys so you can put them on. But I focused specifically on the greenhouse of the vehicle because the windows are so small. It was really, it wasn't always fun.
This is the real problem that designers need to start thinking about. They do this mostly for design, for aesthetic purposes.
Sure.
And when it compromises functionality in such a fundamental way, that's really bad.
Well, and I think that with the Flying Spur, it's for a couple of generations now, it's been difficult to really get a sense of scale from looking at pictures of it. And so in pictures, and I think this is one of the reasons why the windows are small in a lot of cars, it looks dramatic. It's got that low roof. It's really hard to tell how big this thing is, though. And it's
enormous,
enormous, right?
Vehicle. It's enormous. Yeah. No, it's enormous. Now, it was lovely to drive. It was, because it's very, very much of a saloon, it was floaty, even with the dynamic drive. It's all-wheel drive, but even with the dynamic mode, like in sport mode, there wasn't really a significant difference. It's a touring car. It's not a sports sedan. It's not the GT or anything like that. It's amazing to drive. I mean,
the numbers are awesome. This is 626 horsepower.
626 horsepower, a 6.0 liter engine, a W12 configuration for even more torque because the torque was insane.
Yeah, it's a 664 pound-feet of torque.
Yes.
And it's got that people describe it as like electric motor style torque. 1350 RPM, you got full torque. That's crazy.
It was crazy. I mean, we had it in triple digits in seconds, literally seconds. And of course, the roads are empty right now, right? So
I'm assuming you were able to actually try out the top speed. I think Bentley says it'll do 207 miles an hour, and you have the merit.
Absolutely.
You can hit that on the merit.
No, so we actually went over the Tappan Zee Bridge in it because it's a brand new bridge.
200 miles an hour,
and 200 miles an hour.
It's a new bridge, right? I was going to say the new Tappan Zee, right?
Exactly. They could never catch me. So
yeah,
but no, it was really an experience to drive. It was a privilege. It was very much a privilege to drive. So the total price on this thing, so it starts at $214,000, and then there was an $8,800 sound system called Naim, Naim. Naimi. We'd never heard of it.
Ask Alex Roy. He probably can tell you all about it.
I have no doubt that he could. And then the Flying Spur, this black line specification, it was all blacked out, which was really, really cool. So that was $4,700. The Flying Bee radiator mascot in black gloss, $4,860.
But did it still light up though? It lit up, right?
It lit up. It did.
The wings. The wings lit up, right?
Yes, exactly. And then, of course, the first edition specification package was $44,735 for a grand total with a $2,700 destination of $281,175.
Okay, so I know the numbers sound bonkers, but I have not had the privilege of actually seeing one of these in person yet.
Well, there's only a few of them in the States.
Right.
Yeah.
But I kind of it's weird. Like personally, I don't give much of a crap about supercars, except for the engineering in them is bonkers. And when I get a chance to sniff around them, I come away impressed. But and a Bentley, this echelon of car is something different. And you start to look at all of the detailing and all of the craftsmanship, because you talk about what makes it worth that. And you start to look at it and you go, okay, it's a premium price, and you get what you pay for.
Every piece had purpose. That's every button moved with purpose.
Everything is gorgeous and fussed over
it really, I mean, it's just spectacular. It's just spectacular. It really is. And, when you sit in it, you are very conscious of the fact that you're not in a normal car. It just, with the, I should have recorded it and I forgot. When you turn the car on, the whole nav system and the screen
Oh,
rotates
it rotates,
up.
yeah.
Yes, which is, just so fun. I mean,
Does
I
it
thought,
play like the 2001 theme that also sparks Zarathustra?
right? The backs, I mean, sitting in the back seat, Jake was a total baller back there.
Yeah.
So, it was, I mean, it's very much a privileged kind of vehicle. It's absolutely lovely. I mean, just the details on it throughout, are unmistakable. As I said, I mean, every switch, every knob, they just never missed a trick in it. And this one was meteor blue. It was this beautiful blue. And the inside was just this gorgeous cream and blue color. And, it was just, I mean, it was an amazing experience to drive for sure.
Yeah, I see cars like this as just a real celebration of the craft
of extreme wealth.
Well, it's definitely an extreme wealth thing, but beyond that sort of like absurdity of why a thing like this exists, I think I appreciate the design and engineering and thoughtfulness, and really just because it's just a celebration of the craft.
Yes.
And what we can do as, as a craft, I guess. It's this weird thing, right? Like it's this thing that very rich people who don't actually appreciate it.
A celebration of what's possible when you have the resources to build anything.
Yeah, and it's so beautifully done. Like I come out of a background that is just sort of visual and creative, and every little detail in a car like this. And Rolls Royce is the same way too. You start to poke around one of those, and you just
Aston Martin as well.
Everywhere your eye lands is like, oh, somebody thought about this. It's not like, oh yeah, we spat them out of an injection molding machine. Everything is like very well done, and so it doesn't really matter like what's underneath it either. Because there's a lot. There's they have to find economies, so there's shared parts. There's Volkswagen stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parts in here that are shared with the Audi A8 and A7, which is not a bad thing. Nothing wrong with that. Because it's on that same platform, that MLB Evo platform.
Yeah, and they've done such a wonderful job of evolving the Bentley look too. It's dramatic. It looks like a Bentley. They've changed up the sort of front. The visage, I don't know what you'd call it, but the lights are a little different. It looks more like a big large single light,
right? The fascia of it,
but it's got that distinctive Bentley grille. It looks like a Continental always has. I'm not a Continental, a Flying Spur always has.
Right. It's very distinctive. I mean, it's certainly even in Greenwich, it got looks. For sure.
Oh, that's how you know you've made it.
Exactly. No, I mean, it has a presence, and, funny. So, when it arrived, Jake and I went out for a drive in it, and then we decided to get pizza because we're trying to support, our local restaurants. And it turns out that other people wanted to support our local restaurant, and there was a line for pickup, like right on Putnam Avenue, which is like, it's like Post Road, like Route 1. Mm-hmm. And so we're sitting there in line waiting for pizza and they're bringing it out to each car. And we're like, we definitely have the nicest car in the pizza line.
Yeah.
Even in Greenwich.
Well, I mean, that's hard to do in Greenwich. There's a lot of nice stuff there. So
there is, it was pretty funny. But no, it just, and again, as you say, it's really very much a celebration of touring. That's what it's about. It's not what I would call a really engaging driving experience. Obviously with that engine, it's incredible. But it can be floaty. It can be a little bit floaty as you just, kind of truck along. And as I said, the sport mode didn't tighten it up as much as I wanted it to. I wanted to have a little bit more engagement, but that's what the Continental GT is for. So right. This is for touring. This is for Sunday drives, and it does it absolutely, absolutely spectacularly. This was actually the first Bentley that I got a chance to spend time in and to really drive. I think it's tough because really only Jake could go with me. And I would have loved to have, driven my mom around in it or something. What a great experience for her. So, it's unfortunate it had to be this week. Even another month, possibly, I could have driven her, but it was still, just an incredible experience to have. So yeah, it was really cool. And then I had the opposite effect as well. Actually, that's not true. I had a GMC Acadia as well, which I love that lineup of vehicles for them.
The Acadia's not bad. I mean, did you get mistaken for an Uber in Greenwich?
No, this was actually a really beautiful color, and it had the most gorgeous white interior. It was crazy, totally impractical, but absolutely beautiful. I mean, they did a really, really, really nice job with it. So the Acadia it's a full-size car-based SUV. It was actually one of the first large SUV crossovers that came out now like 10 years ago, I think, at least.
Yeah, 2007.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was actually involved when they first came out. They had a lot of engine calibration issues because it was 2006-07 timeframe, and the recession was starting to happen. Fuel economy was top of mind, and they had calibrated, I believe it was the Acadia, they calibrated it really to maximize fuel economy, and it was terrible. Nobody liked it on the ride and drive that we were on out in California. And they actually brought a number of us back a few months later after they had recalibrated the engine, and it was fantastic. And I got to drive around with Grace Lieblein, who ended up becoming, she was an engineer there, and she ended up becoming the president of GM do Brazil before she retired. And, she and I were at the proving grounds just talking about how that balance between needing to get a certain level of fuel economy and satisfying what the consumer wanted. So it's, every time I drive in one of the Lambda platform vehicles, I always think about how much work went into them, and they're actually really, it was women that were the primary engineers on these vehicles. So it's always fun.
Yeah, the second generation Acadia actually got closer to more of a mid-size than a full size, because when they, for the second, when they launched the second generation of the Lambda platform, they wanted to differentiate the three more than they had before. The originals, all on the original versions of the Buick Enclave, the Acadia, the Chevy Traverse, and also
right.
the Saturn Outlook.
Yes,
they all had.
Oh yeah, they all
had exactly the same dimensions.
Right.
So they were all exactly the same size, and it was hard to make the case for why you would go for one over the others, except for maybe the Enclave, which definitely had a more premium feel to it.
Yes.
I liked the Enclave quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. The Enclave was gorgeous.
But the second go around, they split them up a little bit more. They made the Acadia a little shorter. It's about 7 inches shorter than the others. And it's
only a 5-passenger.
Well, it's available with an optional
mine was
third
only
row.
5-passenger, I should say. Yes,
you can get it with a third row seat, but it's really more of an emergency seat.
Right.
It's not really usable for adults. And then the Enclave, they made it a little bit low. The Enclave is the same length as the Traverse now, but it's a little bit lower and wider, so it has distinctly different proportions from the Chevy. And then the Chevy is more the traditional family vehicle.
But I mean, this Acadia, we packed that thing. It swallowed up. We had to bring a bunch of boxes, basically the remains of my father's library, and we were bringing them over to storage, and it was like 8 banker boxes. And once we got those in, we were like, wow, we still have half a car left over. I mean, it was unbelievable. We stuffed even more stuff in there. And, it's great as this one in particular, as you say, Sam, the third row is really for emergencies only in the Acadia. But as a 5-passenger, it was just incredibly comfortable. It actually, I believe mine had captain's seats. So it may have even only been, mine was only a 4-passenger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, I lie. It did have the third row. It wasn't, it's not terrible. Yeah, I'm just looking at my pictures of it. It's not, it's relative, right?
It's definitely a lot more compact.
It's for kids. It's a best saved for kids and small
It's
adults.
times like these that I enjoy the fact that I'm significantly less than 6 feet tall. I fit just about anywhere. Except for the airplane. Airplane, even I am uncomfortable in coach. But.
Right. So the Acadia, though, it's a great family vehicle. And the one that I had, it's a 3.6 liter V6. I think it has a 9-speed transmission, which performed really pretty flawlessly. I mean, I just didn't have any issues with it. It's really well appointed. The one that I had was the Denali, which is the top of the line with all-wheel drive. So the vehicle starts at $29,800. Mine was $52,435 because it was a Denali. So it had basically absolutely everything in it.
I think is it the standard Acadia that's at 29 or?
Yes. Yeah. That's just the very, very, right. the very base. Yeah. Okay. I don't think there's any $29,000 Acadias running around.
Yeah.
That's just the starting price of it.
What's the your impression of the interior quality? I know it's hard too because you drove it back to back with a Bentley, but
but I was actually, I was very impressed with the interior. I think they did a really nice job with it.
Okay, because that's one of the things that this. I think this is very similar to the Cadillac XT6, it like powertrain wise. I know that there's some sharing going on. The XT6 is a little bit distinct, but I haven't had the Acadia. I had the XT6, and one of the things I found was that price wise, when it starts to really creep up there, it's starting to nudge into the 80s and 90s. That interior that feels nice, maybe at 52. Feels not quite as nice. Like you start to go, where'd the money go,
Yeah. I mean, once you start, we've talked before about whether they've been good stewards of the Cadillac brand, and they haven't been. You can't, there should not be that much visible to the consumer. There shouldn't be touch points that are the same between a GMC and a Cadillac. I think that Cadillac needs to be different. I mean,
to their credit though, when you look at the XT6, you don't really see components that are common to an Acadia. It doesn't, they look different, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily look better.
Yeah, I think it was more the quality of the materials and the way it felt, and just like it's nice, but it's more in line with the Acadia nice versus like what it should be for significantly more. But that powertrain was great. I had that. If that's the same powertrain that was in the XT6, it was great.
It is. It's the 3.6 liter with 9-speed.
The only thing with the GMC, it has that stupid lever gear shifter thing. That's a nightmare. I hated that thing.
Yeah, so everybody's trying to do that, and I'm not sure. I don't think that GM is terribly successful with their iteration of it. I see what they're doing, and it's not that different than what Honda and Acura have done.
I know.
That's. I think you're. The Acadia doesn't have the push buttons.
Oh, it doesn't.
It's got a lever. It still has a mechanical lever.
No, the Acadia, it has that five. It's a horizontal stripe just below the radio.
All right, hang on. Let me.
I'm looking at pictures of the Acadia on the media site right now.
I'm looking at pictures of the Acadia that I had in my driveway.
I'm looking at pictures of the Bentley.
Okay, well, I will trust you because on the media site they still have pictures of the 2018. So I think they did refresh it last year, didn't they?
So this one has a big button for park, and then it has a lever forward for reverse, and then neutral, and then forward for drive.
Oh wait, you push it or like a lever or
it's like a tab. It's like a tab that you have to almost like with your finger, with a single finger, you pull it towards yourself.
Oh yeah, that's not what I'm picturing. Like I think this is where Sam jumped in. Like I'm picturing, like, didn't they have like buttons where like there's one that you pull down and then another that you press?
Yeah, I think that's what they refreshed. I think they refreshed that one.
Okay.
So this one, because that was a nightmare.
Well, yeah, this sounds like it also sucks.
Yeah,
though.
it does. But I think it's better than the original one, but I could be mistaken. But this one had the buttons. The gear shifter is across. It's a 5 buttons horizontally, and it sits like below the radiator and above where like you would put your cell phone or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now, and actually, I think what you're thinking of, Rebecca, might be the Terrain. The Terrain
Oh, that one was worse.
had a bad push button system because
Yes, you're
previously
right.
the Acadia did have a traditional mechanical shifter. So they went to a push button system that sounds like it's not really much better than what's on the Acadia or in the Terrain.
It is better than the Terrain, though, because I remember
Okay.
driving the Terrain. Yes, and it is definitely better than the Terrain. And I mean the leather that they used is very nice. There's nice detailing. The top stitching is there. It's still family friendly because you have to keep that in mind. They're still. I mean, this is a family vehicle, and there's a lot of storage and cubby holes and things like that. So and it's a nice, easy vehicle to drive. I think that you get used to that lever push button thing. It's just not something that you want to have to get used to. You want familiarity. So I'm also driving this week. I keep getting double booked, which is difficult, especially this when we're not even supposed to drive. So I have the Subaru Ascent and I have the Toyota Highlander, and both of them, it's just so nice to have like a normal gear shifter in there. But the Acadia, I will say, I don't think that the gear selector is a reason to not purchase. I do think that in the Terrain, that may have been a reason to not purchase. And you're absolutely right, Dan. It was definitely Sam. It was the Terrain that was really difficult. But the Acadia is. I like the size of it. It isn't definitely not as large as the Enclave, and you do feel that it is more upscale than the Traverse. So if you're shopping this size of vehicle, and you basically will only have 4 people in because this did have the captain's chairs, then I think it's a really good selection. If you always or consistently have 5 or 6 people, then you've got to look at the Enclave or the Traverse.
Okay. Yes, so they're calling it electronic precision shift, by the way. Which okay.
Yeah,
but I know
we can
really
call it something else.
This is it's interesting that you were talking about the Ascent and the Highlander, because I'm thinking like this, it really competes in that segment. It's a very competitive set.
It is.
And it competes
Absolutely
against like the Grand Cherokee and just the Pilot, and a lot of competition here. And so does it hold up, or are there reasons to actually purchase it versus reasons to like the shifter?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I do think that it's very much a personal preference. I'll talk obviously about the Ascent and the Highlander next week, but in my quick drives around with them so far, I think the GMC really holds its own, very much so.
Yeah.
So I think it's gets down to price and aesthetics, really.
I have to say,
and passenger size too.
Yeah, absolutely. But if it's big enough for 3, it's like it seems like it's about the right size for that. And it's family, like in terms of that family vehicle. Like I think it has all the sort of the right ideas to, especially in Denali trim, to appeal to those decision makers. Especially if it's like, I'm thinking how we made the decision for the Grand Cherokee. It was less of what I really like in a car, and more of like what my wife likes in a car, because it's like, well, you're going to drive it, and you have to make sure that, because I really wanted a Durango and she didn't like it. And I was like, okay, so what do you like? Like, let's find a few things. And that's really important. And every time I've been in one of these, this particular platform from GM, like they all seem pretty well thought out with that in mind, like who's using it and how is it set up for that person.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very much it's a female friendly car, which isn't to say that it doesn't appeal to men. It's just that I think ergonomically it's really well thought out. Things, switches and buttons are where you want them to be. As I said, there's a lot of storage. I like for a family of four, I think it's a great vehicle, especially if you are going out of town a lot, or you're utilizing the cargo space, and also there's a space in between the two kids, like the two seats are captain's chair.
Do I have to
So,
stop this
I
car?
know. Exactly. If you talk to my mother, she will tell you.
I mean, even when there isn't a pandemic, you still want some social distancing between your kids in the backseat of the car.
Well, and honestly, the dog likes having his own row because he can stretch out a little bit. But yeah,
absolutely.
And in terms of the stuff I like in a car, every time I drive one of these, I'm impressed with the way they ride and handle, and they seem pretty well balanced, and like they spent some time and on the dynamic side of it too, where they're fine to drive. So
yeah, no, they are. It's it drives smaller than it is, and it handles well. It was very well behaved. It was it's comfortable. It's a comfortable car to drive, and by that I mean it's familiar. It's not, there's nothing weird about it, or they're like, why is it doing that?
Except for that shift.
Except for the
shifter, which I actually, I got used to after a while, which is always the goal, right? Is how long does it take to get used to it? Again, it's not a reason not to purchase. I just think it's something that is a little bit different. It does free up a lot of space.
Yeah, but see, and this
is center console.
So would a column shift.
Well, yeah, but I hate column shifters. They're so.
I mean, I think we've got to get used to the fact that column shifters and just traditional shift levers are going away, and they're not coming back because they take up space. There has to be a mechanism that goes in there somewhere. And so they're a pain to package, and variations of either the push buttons or the rotary shift knob are what we're going to see on pretty much everything going forward.
Yeah, I think the rotary shift knob is really the best solution.
Yeah, I agree.
And speaking of future technologies or current that have just come up, the adaptive cruise control I found to be confusing. So the way that you have to set it, most cars, it defaults to adaptive cruise control. This does not. And so I had to play with it and fidget with it. And again, it was and it tells you, and we won't get into touchscreen and non-touchscreen, but I had to read. I actually had to read while I was on the highway trying to set cruise control to figure out what it was telling me. And again, it's one of those things that once you know how to do it, it's fine. It just caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting to have to read what my cruise control was telling me. And so it's like, press this button twice, press this button again if you want it, don't press that. And I was like, oh my goodness. Once I did it then I've only had to press it once again. But it was one of those things. It's like, why is it like that? Just most cars nowadays just default to adaptive cruise control. So I don't know if you guys get a chance, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's been a while since I drove the Acadia, so I don't remember the details of the setup, but it does sound familiar that it had some weird quirks to it. I know GM's done some weird things with their cruise control setup over the years.
Yes, yeah, and so hopefully that stuff will get ironed out as well. So,
all right,
that's what I've been doing.
Well, Sam, how did it go with the e-Tron?
Yeah, so I finally had the e-Tron for a full week. I had driven it April of last year or so, May of last year, out in California. We drove from Napa up to Tahoe, but this time I got the chance to really spend some time with it, and I wanted to find out in regular driving how much real range it could have, that it actually had. Because one of the complaints about the e-Tron, the e-Tron is Audi's first volume production battery electric vehicle. And it's, rightly gotten some criticism for its range, because, it's kind of in the same, at least at the bottom end of the price class against, the Tesla Model X, so the Model X is kind of its natural competitor in this space. And the e-Tron is only rated at 204 miles on the EPA driving cycle, whereas the Model X, depending on which configuration you get, you can get up to about 300 miles of range. And generally, Teslas have much better EPA label range than any other EV. And one of the stories we've got later, we'll talk about that. But I put about I went out over the course of several days, driving for about an hour and a half each day, just putting miles on this thing, driving around various routes to see how far it could actually go. And by the time that I pulled into the Electrify America station down the road from my house, I had I had 210 miles on it, or 212 miles on it, and I had 7 miles left showing on the range estimate. So say, 219, 220 miles. So I actually did a little bit better than the EPA range, although because of the moderate temperatures I had, I didn't have to use the heat or cruise control or anything like that. I did use wipers because we did have some rain. And this particular one that I was driving had the optional 21-inch wheels, which are generally going to give you, that's going to cut into the range because they're heavier and they've got more rolling resistance and more inertia. But, in general, hitting that 200-mile mark, is always a good thing. And to be honest, unless you are driving long distances all the time, in which case you might want to reconsider, whether an EV is the right vehicle for you at this point. But, for the average driver that drives, 50, 60, even 80 miles a day, anything over, 200 miles of range or more on an electric vehicle really is more than adequate. It's only in comparison to certain other vehicles where it starts to look inadequate. And, I think, Audi should be able to do better with what they have, because this thing has a 95 kilowatt hour battery pack in it, but it weighs 5,700 pounds, which is, this is a heavy beast
How
of a
much
vehicle.
of that is the battery?
About 1,400 pounds is the battery.
Wow. What does
Between
an engine weigh?
Depends, like a fully dressed Chevy small block, with all the accessories on it and everything, about 400 pounds.
Wow.
So batteries are definitely a lot heavier than internal combustion engines, even with all the other stuff.
But electric motors are lighter, right? Like,
electric motors are lighter. But batteries are, I mean, an electric motor like the ones in the e-Tron, weigh under 100 pounds.
Okay.
I think they're probably about 60 or 70 pounds. So they're not that heavy.
They're not permanent magnet though, right? Like, or are they? I forget.
The e-Tron, I believe, is permanent magnet.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I expected a permanent magnet motor to be much heavier, but okay.
Yeah. No, because they're not that big.
Yeah, that's true.
They're fairly small. But the thing is, this thing has a lot of features on it. It's a heavy vehicle. So that really cuts into that range a lot because it's a fair bit of work. And the other thing is, when they launched the e-Tron, Audi went very conservative on how they use the battery. So even though it has 95 kilowatt hours worth of cells in there, they only use 88% of that. So there's only 83.5 kilowatt hours actually available, which is, quite a bit less than what you get in a long range Model S or Model X. They're both 100 kilowatt hours. So that, that cuts into it, but still, it's not as efficient, or at least on paper, it's not as efficient as the Teslas, but it's, I think for the reality is it's good enough. And the other thing is the e-Tron does support 150 kilowatt charging. And so you can actually charge it up fairly quickly. I pulled in, I had about 3% charge left on the battery. And I pulled in, plugged it in, and then, took a phone call, and I was on the phone for, about 40 minutes. And by the time I was done with the call, it was full, like, just, it was about 45 minutes to go from 3% to 100% state of charge. So, and if you go to 80%, which is what, that's where they start to taper off the charge, you you can do that in under 30 minutes. So, it's really not that inconvenient. And, the e-Tron does come with a charging cable that has, you can plug two adapters onto it. One is to plug it into a standard 110 volt outlet, and slow charge it that way. Or if you have a 240 volt outlet in your garage, a standard dryer plug, a NEMA 1450 dryer plug, it's got an adapter. You just plug it into the thing and you plug into that, and you get, I think it's 10 kilowatt charging with that. So you can easily charge it up overnight without having to spend, several $100s more on getting a level 2 charger installed in your garage. So,
Yeah.
The range, is actually pretty good. It's fine. It's not spectacular, especially if you compare it to, say, the Hyundai Kona EV or Chevy Bolt, both of which are rated at 259 miles and can easily get that. And, if you drive, especially the Bolt, if you drive it with the in the low range, where you get the maximum regen, you can easily get a Bolt over 300 miles of driving without trying very hard.
The thing,
But go ahead.
okay, the thing with the e-Tron too is that, it's what struck me when I drove it was that it's just so normal. You forget you're
Yeah.
driving an EV, and I love that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When they did the launch of the e-Tron in September 2018 in San Francisco, I was there. I was talking to some of the folks from Audi, so what are they? Obviously, people are going to see the Model X as the chief competitor to this, and they said, well, really, we're not. They said we're not targeting the Model X, and how much of that statement was because they didn't actually, in terms of range, they knew it wasn't going to be fully competitive, or just they really weren't trying to do that. And I think it's the reality is somewhere in between. But what they said was, we designed this to be an Audi first,
Yeah.
and then it happens to be electric. So when you get inside, if you've been in any contemporary Audi, an A7, A8, Q7, Q5, Q8, you get in, you climb into the e-Tron, it feels just like any other Audi. There is nothing about this that is going to surprise you about the way it looks or feels or the materials. Everything works just like you would expect in an Audi. And so for people that like Audis, it's a great choice, and it happens to be electric. If if an Audi's not for you, well, I mean, if you weren't interested in any other Audi, you probably wouldn't be interested in this one. And there's other choices available for you in that case. But it is very, very ordinary. Very, you'll feel very comfortable in it. You won't. It doesn't feel like a science experiment.
Right. So I was fortunate to go on the launch in Abu Dhabi, and we actually drove from Abu Dhabi down to the border with Oman, which was a good hour and a half, almost actually over 2 hours driving. And then when we were sitting there for lunch, then they recharged everything up and we drove back up, and we actually got lost. My driving partner desperately needed to use the restroom, and I have been to Abu Dhabi a number of times, so I was trying to tell him where to go. He made the wrong turn, which is very easy to do in this one particular intersection, and we ended up driving around, and we never once thought of range, and we had been driving all day. And that to me was really a testament of just how comfortable we were in it, that while we're doing this kind of driving around this crazy city, we just never thought of, oh my gosh, and we were nowhere close to losing range because we weren't getting warnings, or wasn't communicating with us that there was any kind of issue at all. But to me, it really just spoke to just how normal. I actually would have loved for them to have just called this like either Q6E or something and just gave it a more normal name, because I think it just slots into their lineup with any other vehicle, and it just happens to be electric. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah, and when I interviewed Matt Mostefi, who's the manager of e-Tron stuff at Audi, back at the LA Auto Show, we had that interview on the show in early December. one of the things that they talked about was, with the naming, they named this e-Tron, and e-Tron is going to be Audi's brand for plug-in vehicles going forward, just as Quattro is for everything with all-wheel drive. And they see this as
which this has, by the way, too.
Yes, it does. And so they see this as like the Quattro, the original Quattro coupe from 1983 or 84. This is the electric equivalent of that. This is the e-Tron, and they're going to have all these other e-Trons going forward, and that's the branding they're going to use on everything that has a plug. So you've got the e-Tron Sportback coming later this year, which is basically the same vehicle, but with a fastback roof line. And speaking of which, the Sportback, they're making, based on their experience so far with the battery, they're making some adjustments with the battery management. So they're going to bump it up to using 92% of the battery capacity and doing some other calibration changes. So it should get up to a rated range of somewhere around 225 miles with the Sportback, and eventually the wagon will get those same changes as well. And then the GT, the
is that
e-Tron
over
GT,
the air? I'm sorry, can they do that over the air?
No, that won't be an over the air change. And the existing e-Trons that are already built won't get those changes, but that'll come as a mid-cycle update to the e-Tron wagon.
Okay, I didn't know if it was like a software thing they could do.
No, it's not, because they actually made some physical changes as well to the battery. So the e-Tron GT, which is based on the Porsche Taycan, and then the Q4 e-Tron, is coming next year. So starting with the Q4, it'll be a combination of e-Tron with other badges, like the traditional Audi, alphanumeric badging. Just this
That'll
one
be
is
cool,
it's the
then.
only one that is just e-Tron.
Right. Okay.
So
they took my advice. I'm going to send them a bill. Excellent.
Send an invoice to Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll sign off.
The thing that continues to stick out to me is that maybe it's an Audi for Audi people, but it's also because it's an Audi, it means that you're going to get that performance every single time, over and over and over again. It's just like the Taycan, same kind of thing. It'll rip off, acceleration run after acceleration run after acceleration run. It's been carefully tested and vetted and poked and prodded, and just.
And when you need parts, you won't have to wait 6 months for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the real strengths, and one of the things that performance and range aside would really put me into the Audi, because the other ones that we mentioned are all viable too, like the Bolt. Absolutely, I really like the Bolt. But if you're looking for that luxury experience, now you can get it with the Audi, and it's going to be
the other main competitor right now in the U.S. market would be the Jaguar I-Pace,
right? Which is also fantastic. Like but
the I-Pace is a little bit smaller.
Yep.
It's a little bit tighter inside. So if what you're looking for is and size wise, the e-Tron, is in between the Q5 and the Q7, but closer to the Q7.
Right.
So that's almost the same size as the Q8. So it's really roomy for 5 passengers. Lots of, it's like 28 feet of cargo space behind the second row. So there's plenty of room. There is one aspect of the e-Tron that I absolutely hate. The climate controls. Audi has gone to this new MMI version that features dual touchscreens. The top touchscreen is reserved for media, navigation, and settings. The lower screen below it is for climate controls.
Nobody who does dual touchscreens does them well. It's just a bad idea. Stop it.
Well, even if it was a single big touchscreen with the same interface, it would still suck. It's not the fact that it's a dual touchscreen that's the problem. It's a terrible interface.
Well, there's that.
Just give me 3 simple dials, for temperature, direction, and fan
speed. But that's not the
that's
future, Sam. That's not the future. The future
sucks.
Yeah, the future is wasted motion and frustration, and you just want to
I mean,
punch that thing.
Just trying to figure out how to. Just trying to, I went for a drive with my wife to let her experience this thing, and it was a little chilly outside, so we had the windows closed, and the windshield was starting to fog up, and just trying to figure out how to get the air to blow to defog the windshield was maddening. I could not do it while driving. This is a horrible interface, and this is the same interface Audi's using on all their current, all their new stuff. Just stop. Everybody, every manufacturer, just stop with putting the climate controls in the touchscreen.
I agree.
Please.
Yes,
don't ever do it again.
It's a safety issue.
Agree.
And it's like
all three of us agree.
Because I think it is a safety issue. And every time I bitch about it, everybody's like, how often are you going to mess with the climate control? It's like, honestly, no, look, if I need full defrost, I need it quick because all of a sudden it's snowing and my windows are foggy. And I don't want it to be an auto. Auto doesn't know what to do with that. Like I need it and I don't want to.
Auto's fine for maintaining whatever temperature you set it at. But if you want to switch it to a different mode, it's terrible. You shouldn't have to mess with it like that. So, the e-Tron, starts, current starting price is $75,000 in the US for the Premium Plus, and the Prestige starts at $79,100. The one I had was the Prestige and had a few other options on there. Came to a total of $86,000, $85,790 with delivery.
But you can buy one out of stock. You can go get one.
You can buy one out of stock. There's plenty of stock at Audi dealers. They're not selling
at dealers.
Right, at dealers.
Yes, at dealerships.
Service department.
Complete service department that will take care of you.
Everybody gives dealers crap, right? And then all of a sudden, when you have that other experience, you're like, oh, actually, some of the stuff they do is pretty good.
Yeah. And because Volkswagen Group hasn't yet sold 200,000 vehicles, it's still eligible for the full $7,500 federal tax credit. So the base model starts so you'd be at $67,500 for the base model as a starting price.
I'm sorry, that's a really good deal for what's going to be a really well made car.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So if you're looking for an EV tall wagon or SUV, if you must. It's absolutely worth taking a look at this thing. It's a really nice vehicle.
Tall wagon. You know what? They could have named it in German. They could have called it an Uberwagen.
Yeah.
So wait, what was your price on the one that you drove?
The one I drove was $85,790, and it was pretty much loaded. It had pretty much every option. Okay. I personally would skip the $1,500 21-inch wheels and go with the 19-inch Aero wheels instead, because with the 21s, the ride quality does suffer, and it's also, it has an impact on efficiency and range. So you will get a little more. You'll probably get few more miles of range with the 19s. And frankly, I think the 19-inch Aero wheels actually look really good. I mean, the 21s look good too, but the 19s still look really good as well, and you'll have a more comfortable ride and better efficiency.
Yeah, we had the ones that they estimate, we didn't have exact pricing yet. The one I drove, it was $82,795, and so, but again, that was more of an estimate. That was last year, and they mentioned 1920s and 21s. But again, I think that some of that has evolved.
Yeah, so the base model has 18s on it, I think. And then there's 19s and 20s available. 19s, 20s, and 21s available as options.
So now does the European rating system give a different number for the range?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So in Europe, they use the WLTP test cycle, which is the World Light Duty Test Protocol, which they started adopting in Europe in the fall of 2018. And so in Europe, it's rated at, I think, 270 miles.
Okay, we had 259 was our estimate.
Okay, maybe it was 259. Yeah. 259, 260. But the WLTP cycle is definitely not as realistic. It's better. It's better than the old NEDC test protocol that they used.
Right.
It's definitely much better than that. But really, the EPA test cycle is actually the most realistic one out there right now, anywhere in the world.
Well, yeah, because what I wrote was the estimate they were at the time they were estimating, and I wrote 200 to 210 miles, and it came out at 204.
Right.
So yeah, I think that was very, very realistic.
Yeah. And one of the stories I've got on the rundown for after we're done with Dan's vehicle is about real world range. So we'll get to that.
While you guys were all in highly luxurious vehicles, I was for the little driving I did, I was in the 2022 at a Yaris XLE, which is a Mazda 2. But it's not a delightful car. It's light and tiny, and I love small, cheap cars because they, by their very nature, they force clever solutions that aren't expensive. Just one of the details I just was geeking out about was just the way there's just a tiny cut in the rear bumper cover for you to get your hand in there, and the switch to release the rear hatch is under there. There's not a big grab handle or anything. It keeps the hardware cost down. It's just molded into the bumper. It's clever stuff like that you see in that small, inexpensive class of cars that you don't see anywhere else, because they've had to bring it in for a price. And I don't know, those kind of things make me, I get verklempt when I see them.
What is that grill trying to eat?
That is the one flaw with this Yaris.
What the?
It's ugly.
What?
It
is.
So it's one of those things like, look.
It's like baby fish mouth.
Her nose isn't that bad in person.
Yes, it is. I drove this thing a couple years ago. I was on the launch drive. I was on the launch drive when this thing was still known as the Scion IA before they killed Scion.
Okay.
And it's ugly.
It's not. It's definitely not.
The front end is ugly.
Not. Well, you can't get a Mazda 2 in the States anymore. So this is a way to get it. It doesn't look as good as the Mazda, but it's not as bad as it looks in pictures. Like it looks a little better in person. It's still not an elegant little bit of rhinoplasty.
Well, the best part is from the driver's seat you can't see the grill, so it doesn't matter.
That's true.
The rest of it is like, I forgot for a moment that the Yaris is the Mazda 2, so I got it and I'm like, wait a second, what the hell car am I in? Because all the switches and buttons and controls and everything it's Mazda, even the dash, and it's all Mazda. And so you get in and you're like, oh yeah. But it's great because it's got the Mazda infotainment, which it's still not, it's a little clunky. There's sort of too many things to select with the little rotary selector. Like their menu structure needs to be flatter, but it's better than
Entune.
Right. I was gonna say it's much better than Entune, and just the materials are nice in the XLE. It doesn't feel cheap. It's a little, the doors sound a little tinny. It's a little noisy on the road. Around town, it's fine. It's a perfect around town runabout. It's
do you have the hatch or the sedan?
Hatch. I love the hatch.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one to get. The sedan you're going to miss out on some of the usefulness because of the shape. It goes down the road really well. It's not sporty in that sense, but it just, because it's small and light, it has that feeling of, I don't know, flingability or whatever. It just feels direct, I suppose, is the best way to put it. There's not as much between you and the road, because there's not as much between you and the road. Like, that's for a very good reason.
It's like what the Mini was when it was first revived. Except without the premium price.
Yeah.
And without that giant, she was ugly from the front grill. And why is that? I love it. She's hot to go. You've got to listen to that song. So why is the hatchback almost $2,000 more? Does it come with other stuff besides just a hatch?
I didn't really dig into pricing. What's the difference?
Yeah, it's so $2,100 difference. So $15,650 for the sedan, which is crazy cheap.
That's the XLE sedan or just
no? Base? That's just base.
Okay,
and then $17,750 for this hatch.
Yeah, this is an odd phenomenon that I've noticed with other brands as well. It's not just this vehicle. Where the hatchback is more expensive than the sedan. And I suspect it has something to do with the fact that people who go for the hatchbacks
Want them.
really want the hatchback. Right. They prefer the hatchback. And so they're willing to pay a premium for it. So it's not so much that you're necessarily getting a whole lot more other than the utility, but people are willing to pay for that for some reason.
Well, they do have, so the base Yaris is the L, and that's the 15650, right. And the base hatch is the LE.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
So you are getting, so you are getting more stuff, but it's still $1,000 more than the LE sedan.
Right, but and Toyota's not the only one that does this. Like Hyundai and Kia do it as well, where the hatch doesn't reach all the way down to that base trim. They started off in the middle. Yeah. And so that's definitely part of it. But as an XLE trim, there's not much you want, there's not much you need here. Like this is a fully realized car, like it.
Well, especially that price point. I mean, it's $18,750. That's a great price.
It's a fantastic car. It's a fantastic price. Like I know it's really a Mazda masquerading as a Toyota. Go with it. Like it keeps.
Aren't we all?
It keeps both of those companies alive. Like look, Toyota has made a very smart choice to say, why are we going to develop our own thing? Mazda makes a pretty good one. Let's just buy theirs. So they're paying Mazda for some volume. Mazda gets to make cars that otherwise wouldn't get bought. And, Toyota gets a decent small car. And I didn't mind the old Yaris either. I thought that was okay. But this is the best Yaris has ever been because
that's awesome.
It drives well.
This is the whole, this is sort of the beauty of the market, right? Is that you can have vehicles like the Yaris that perform really well, that do what it needs to do. And then we've got crazy Bentley things at the other end. But I love the fact that it was a good little car. It deserves, like every car out there deserves to be good. It deserves to get the type of quality and engineering that buyer, it's like respecting that buyer, right? Yeah. And there's certain things that they just, that, for that, it's still a lot of money. I mean, that's the thing too, is that, cars are still your second most expensive purchase. And so you're asking somebody to turn over a lot of money. Give them something that is decent. Give them something that, that respects them.
Yeah, it's inexpensive without feeling cheap. And I think honestly,
that's awesome.
Like styling wise, like it's not going to get any better. But it's also like it doesn't look chintzy.
And aside from that grill, the rest of it does look good. It's got modern Mazda styling once you get past the grill. And as far as the price goes, I just pulled it up on the Toyota website, and the reason why you can get the LE cheaper than the LE sedan cheaper than the hatchback is because the LE sedan is available with a manual transmission.
Hatch is not,
and the hatchback is only automatic. So
okay, so you are getting right away.
If you get the LE sedan with an automatic, it's the same price. It's $17,750.
And
okay.
The powertrain is, Mazda makes a nice refined 4-cylinder, and it works really well with the transmission. I liked the steering; it felt direct. It was still maybe a little numb. I didn't really get much of a chance to bend it hard into an on ramp and see. I went for quarantine groceries, so I didn't do a whole lot of driving. But like we talked about with the Audi, right? All the controls are frustrating in that car. They're so straightforward here. And this is one of the reasons I think probably why I still like the smaller, cheaper cars is there's no room to get fancy like that with that nonsense. Things just have to be straightforward. And so it's got 3 knobs for climate control. It had push button start. It had nice visibility out of the front. The belt line the cowl is low. You really don't need more car than this, was what I was thinking most of the time I was driving. It was just, this is perfectly, adequate. And that's kind of a crappy way to put it. This is more than adequate, I would say, for most people. I probably wasn't leather on the seats, probably like leatherette, but they look good. They feel good. I think you get it out on the highway, it might be a little noisy, but other than that, I really can't find much to complain about. This is probably one of my favorite cars in this class. and one of my favorite cars overall, which is weird to say about a Yaris, but
No, it's not. I mean, but that's the thing, is that they did something really, really well with it. And as you say, it makes sense for Toyota to just buy the technology, buy the vehicle from Mazda, so they can fund other projects.
yeah, Toyota's not messing around.
And
Like they just, they're being smart with their investment. They're like, hey, we need a sports car. Let's buy one from BMW. Hey, we need a tiny hatch. Let's buy one from Mazda. And it's sort of the newest reality with car companies. It's like, why you're going to beat each other's brains out for tiny markets where you're not going to have any share. Like, at least if you combine forces, you can all have a little bit of share without sort of that huge investment. I don't know. It seems like a better, more collaborative approach.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's why for example this week GM and Honda announced that Honda is going to use GM's new EV platform as the basis.
You are the king of segue.
That's awesome.
Tonight.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, EVs, represent a tiny share of the market. I mean, it's less than 2% of the U.S. market, and Honda needs some EVs, to meet the ZEV mandates in California and other states. And so they're going to use GM's BEV3 platform that we saw last month in Detroit, including their Ultium battery system, and they're doing 2 EVs based on that, and they're actually going to be built at GM factories. We don't know yet if it's going to be at the Detroit Hamtramck plant or some other plant that's set to be announced. But GM is going to build Hondas, which is a first.
Well, they have had relationships in the past. You could get a Honda engine
GM's actually
the Saturn Vue.
Yep, they've had a relationship going back to the 1990s. With, as you said, the Saturn Vue had a Honda V6 in it, and they've been doing some other stuff together on fuel cells, and Honda was also involved in the development of the module design for the Ultium battery system.
Oh, really?
So it makes sense that they would. Yeah, they had announced a partnership on battery module design about 1.5 years ago, and they never really talked about it after that. But I guess Honda was part of this, and so that's part of why Honda is using this now. And it's going to be the first models to be coming out in 2024 for using the GM platform. And the other thing is they're not only are they using GM's electric propulsion system, Honda's also going to get Super Cruise. These vehicles are going to be the first non-GM vehicles to offer Super Cruise. Yeah,
that's amazing. I wonder what they'll call it, because they're not going to call it
Super Honda Cruise.
Yeah, you never know. They might call it Super Cruise.
I wonder if they're going to have it before Chevys.
No. The Chevy Bolt EUV next year is going to. Yeah, so this is the crossover based on the Bolt.
They need to get better at the names.
Know.
Jesus, yeah. EUV.
So that one's going to be the first Chevy to offer Super Cruise, and then also, there's going to be some other Chevy stuff as well over the next couple of years.
It really does make sense to share. This stuff is so expensive to develop, and I think Honda can bring, and they talk about it amongst themselves at Honda, right? The Honda way is very much the same as there's the Toyota way as well, but like, just the things that Honda can bring to GM will make GM better, and the things that GM can bring to Honda will allow Honda to continue being Honda. You know what I mean? Like, I think it really does make sense. And we're seeing, Ford is partnered up with VW too. So I think the automakers are realizing that they need to collaborate on this stuff, and they can still put their personalities into the cars.
Yeah, and as we've talked about before, the electric powertrain, there's a lot less differentiation from one to another there than there is with engines. All electric motors feel basically the same. There's not, you get into aside from however much power they have and whatever, the acceleration they can produce, they basically all sound and feel the same. They're just kind of seamless propulsion. So whether you've got a Tesla or a Volkswagen or a GM motor and battery in there, to the average consumer, they're not going to know the difference. They're going to, the design and the user experience inside the vehicle is what they're going to experience. So it's good for manufacturers to focus on that part of it and share the technology that the customer is not going to see.
I think the differentiator is the regenerative braking, personally. Like, that's where I feel differences, that companies do that better than others. Some do it better than others.
And that's something you can easily calibrate, even with the same hardware, because that's all just done in software anyway.
Right. But that feel, though, I mean, I agree with you. It's hard to tell the difference between an electric, but it doesn't mean the driving experience is exactly the same.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's where we're going to see them still continue to be unique from each other, is how, Acura and Honda engineers make the cars feel as a whole. How they go down the road, how they go around corners, how they hit bumps and stuff is going to be different than the way GM vehicles do. And not necessarily better or worse, but different. And because they've tuned them with their people and stuff. I mean, we're seeing that already with the Supra and the Z4 to a degree. I mean, they're pretty similar, but they're still different,
Exactly. Yeah. And even the Miata, Miata and the Fiat, the 124.
The Fiata.
Fiata.
For as long as that one's with us. Staying with EVs, Autocar published an interesting article this week.
They published a couple interesting ones. There was that one about Honda. I mean, Honda ditching touchscreens, which I don't want to touch on. I just want to mention it so people can go read it, because yay.
Yeah. So Autocar, which is a British car magazine, did an article where they published the electric cars that they've tested with the best real world range. So this is all based on their actual road testing of these vehicles. And what's interesting, they compare, in their comparisons in the individual vehicle reviews, they compare the range that they got against the European rated range, which is on that WLTP cycle I was talking about earlier. And so, pretty much all of them fell short of the WLTP numbers. But what's interesting is when you compare it against the EPA numbers, most, like the top half of this list were all pretty much right on what the EPA numbers were. Like the number one on their list was the Hyundai Kona EV at 259 miles, which is exactly what its EPA rating is. The Jaguar I-Pace at 253, its EPA rating, they just bumped it up recently to like 248 or something, I think. So it's really close. The Kia Niro EV, 253 miles, and it's 239 on the EPA rating. What's interesting is when you get to the Teslas, which all fell way, way short of both their EPA and WLTP ratings.
That's because they hate Tesla.
Sure. Yeah, whatever.
Why do you hate Tesla? Why are you a hater, bro?
You don't understand. You short seller, you.
Yeah. I posted this article on Twitter a few days ago when it first came out, and Dan Edmonds commented on it. Dan used to be at Edmonds.com, and he's no relation to the family that owns Edmonds.com. But over the last 5 or 6 years, he did a lot of testing in a lot of different Tesla models. And one thing that he commented on, and he's told me in the past, is that he has never gotten a Tesla to get anywhere near its EPA rating, EPA rated range in the real world. They always fall a good 20 to 30% short of the EPA ratings. So, the Model 3, I think the longest range Model 3 now is about 320 miles. And that one got 239 miles from Autocar, which is, that's about 30% short.
Well, they obviously did it wrong.
Clearly, yes, clearly. The Nissan Leaf Plus, they got 217. It's rated, I think, at 220 on the EPA cycle. So, it's an interesting test. They got some fascinating results from this.
I wonder if it would be different in the U.S. just because of the terrain and the sort of the driving styles and locales? Or
Well, no, but
Uh,
I mean, I think because they got similar ones on some vehicles, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, the terrain, one of the things, I learned a long time ago with EVs, with plug-in vehicles, is the three T's, temperature, terrain, and technique. So that, all three of those things can have a huge impact on your electric driving range. If it's cold or very hot, your driving range is going to get cut significantly, because of the need to use climate control. Plus, especially when it's cold, the battery performance is not as good, so you're going to lose range from that as well. Terrain, obviously, if you're going up a lot of hills, your range is going to be less. And technique, if you're driving it hard, you're gonna get worse range, just as you'll with an internal combustion car, you'll get worse fuel economy if you're driving it hard. I think for purposes of this testing, Autocar, tested them all, does their range testing all, roughly the same way, on this, on the same terrain, so they're getting comparable results for for all these different vehicles. So, the fact that, a lot of them that aren't from Tesla, get pretty close to what the EPA rated range is an indicator that, the Audi or the Teslas are not as good as what their claims are.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting scrolling through the list, and we just talked about the Audi, and the Audi in this test got so bang on the numbers, right? That
yeah, it got 196, I think. Yeah, so it's a few miles short of the official rated range, 204, but it's pretty close.
So
that's the thing, is that the numbers that they're getting for other vehicles are what the estimates are close to what the estimates are. And it's just only Tesla. So why does Tesla do so well then in the EPA ratings?
So there's a couple things. Number one, Tesla when they do their testing and they submit their numbers, they do the testing based on using 100% of battery capability. So they run it from 100% down to 0.
Nobody else does that.
Right. Nobody else does that.
Nobody else does that. And in fact, when you get a Tesla and you get into, you go to drive it, the default is actually that it only uses 90% of the battery capacity. It does not use 100%.
Can you, as a user, change that?
Yes, you can. There is a mode that you can go into, and I forget exactly what it's labeled as, but you can go into the settings and you can say, I want maximum range, and it'll charge it up to 100%, and it'll use 100% of the available range. But when you do that, it also pops up a warning on the screen saying, this may cause permanent damage to your battery. So, recommend using this sparingly. And, I think most people just use the default, which is just using 90% of the range. I'm not sure. That's one thing. I'm not sure what, how Autocar did that, if they used the maximum range mode or not. But, I'm assuming they used just the default settings, which is, what they typically do. And I know, talking to Dan, Dan Edmonds, that's what his numbers are based on, using the default configuration, which is 90% of the battery capacity. The other thing is that, manufacturers here in the U.S. Self-certify. So, for whether it's for a gas or a diesel car or an electric vehicle, they do the testing themselves, and then they submit the results to EPA. EPA looks over the paperwork that they submit, and every year they test. They'll audit about 15% of new models that come to market. So they'll get samples of those cars and they'll bring them to the EPA lab here in Ann Arbor, and they will run through the full battery of tests. And if their results come up significantly different from what the manufacturer submitted, then they use their results. But most of the vehicles that go to market are based, the EPA will look at whatever the manufacturer submitted, and if there's nothing that looks too obviously wrong, then they will, they'll sign off on it, and that's what goes on the label. EPA has never tested a Tesla. They've never audited any Tesla vehicles. So it's possible that, and this, it would not be the first time that this has happened, that, Tesla's testing procedures were not totally in line with with the way it's officially supposed to be done. I mean, other manufacturers have gotten busted in the past. Ford several years ago got busted. Hyundai and Kia got busted. Mini got busted, and usually what it came down to in those cases was part of the way they do the testing is they do, a coast down test. So they go up to a certain speed and coast down and see what the load, the road load is, to coast down to a certain speed, and that takes into account things like aerodynamics and rolling resistance and all that. From the results of that, they use that to set up the dynamometer for the load on the dynamometer to simulate, the behavior of the vehicle in the real world. And then they run the actual test cycle on the dynamometer. So, in the past, some manufacturers, like I said, have gotten that wrong. I'm not going to accuse them of doing it deliberately, because it's never been proven that they did it deliberately, but they certainly got that load testing part of it wrong, which meant that they ended up getting higher numbers for MPG than what the vehicle was actually capable of in the real world. Case in point was, the 2013 Ford Fusion hybrid and the C-Max hybrid. They were both rated at 47 miles per gallon, city, highway, and combined, and then after EPA got a bunch of complaints and audited those vehicles, the Fusion got lowered to like about 41 miles per gallon. So it was a pretty significant difference. So far, they've never done that with a Tesla vehicle. So, based on real world results, from, normal driving, they generally come up well short of those EPA numbers, those EPA label numbers. And I don't know why EPA has never looked into that.
Yeah, do they have to do it based on customer complaints? Because nobody
No,
for the Tesla is going to complain.
EPA can do it anytime they want.
Okay.
Because, they, like I said, they pick a random sample every year of about 15% of the new models that come to market and do their own testing. The intent is, because manufacturers don't know which ones are going to get picked for testing. And, so the hope is that keeps them honest, because EPA doesn't have enough capacity to test every new vehicle and every powertrain configuration.
Sure.
So they rely on the manufacturers to do that.
The Fox, the henhouse thing,
Yeah. Yeah, and
they just don't have the budget to do it.
It's one thing when car makers do it, and they use more fuel or use more energy than they claim. It's entirely another thing when an aircraft manufacturer self-certifies and systems don't actually work the way they're intended to.
Yeah, the term for that,
planes fall out of the sky,
regulatory capture, and it is a bad thing. Manufacturers and industry loves it because they, again, like, it is the fox guarding the henhouse, and the federal agencies just don't have enough money to even just to audit everybody. So I don't know what the solution is, but you do wind up in this situation with fuel economy and with EV range, as it pertains to cars and emissions as well. There's room for bad actors and bad actions to sort of slip through for a while, which is, we saw it with the Volkswagen diesel thing too.
Right. And, that's a perfect example. In Europe, they have to go through a homologation process, where, the certification, they don't self-certify in Europe. And, VW still managed to slip through that because of the way that they cheated, with, they set it up so that when you're running the tests, everything behaved the way it was intended to. And yeah, and then as soon as you put it on the real world, then, all of a sudden now the emission controls are not working the way they were designed to. And, they're polluting a lot more. And this is why, one of the things when the EU changed to WLTP in late 2018, part of that test procedure now is also a real world driving test. So not only do they test every new vehicle on the dynamometer, they also do a real driving emissions test. And, so that the vehicles actually have to prove that they can pass emissions on a real world drive cycle, not just on a dyno.
Yeah. I think the flip side of that, though, is they're willing to pay for it. And I don't think that that's something that we're going to come up with the money for anytime soon. So
not anymore.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
for sure.
It would be great if because it really affects everybody on the emission side, and even with EVs, like that energy has to come from somewhere. So if we can make everything as efficient as possible, we all benefit to a degree. I mean, look out your window right now. Like we've got the clearest skies and there's coyotes running down the street in Chicago. It's pretty good.
I've seen a fox wandering around the golf course across from me a couple times in the past week.
So it would be a good investment. It would be something that maybe could get figured out. But in the meantime, expect more weird number stuff to happen.
Yep.
We got a little off track, so let's pull ourselves back on track and let's talk about stuff that's not efficient, like the Mustang GT350. It's the Shelby Mach 1. What the hell am I trying to say, Sam?
I have no idea what you're trying to say. Apparently, the GT350 is going away at the end of the 2020 model year. That is such a
terrible decision.
I know, but it's the way it goes.
They're gonna drop that car in favor of the GT500. Dumb.
Yes.
Dumb.
So
dumb.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
But they are apparently going to be launching the Mustang Mach 1, and I think last fall I mentioned this when we talked about the Mach E at the LA Auto Show. A couple of weeks before the show, I went to a private briefing at the Ford Product Development Center, and with some of the folks from Team Edison and the Mach E team. And one of the things in that presentation, there was a big timeline, Mustang timeline from 1965 up through 2021, and a 2021 along with the Mach E, right next to Mach E, it also had Mach 1 on there. And my guess is that the Mach 1 is the Mustang hybrid that they first announced back in 2017 was going to be coming. Because that would make sense, to do a Mach 1, to make the hybrid the new Mach 1, and it'll probably have performance comparable to the GT350, so somewhere around 500 plus horsepower.
It makes me sad to lose the Voodoo engine. I loved the 350 so much. The GT350, that's such a visceral car, and just that engine.
It is
the flat plane V8. Just I don't know. The GT500 seems less visceral in a way.
It's visceral in a different way. It's a very different kind of experience. Rebecca, have you ever driven the GT350?
I haven't. I've had very little exposure
now,
to
that
Mustangs.
Is something you should tear through Greenwich with. It's just like in first gear.
Right?
First gear at 8,200 RPM.
That was a car. I swear to God, like just it's one of those because it can rev so high. It was you just put your foot in it and you'd be like, oh, it's time to shift. Nope, not time to shift. Oh, time to shift now. Nope, not time to shift. And it just pulls all the way to rev line and it screams and sounds so good. You just ride around in like third gear on the highway just to hear it roar. It's just God, I loved that car.
Tell us how you really feel. No, that's awesome. No, I think, it's a shame if it's going away because that engine is just so unique.
It is.
And, it's a shame.
But yeah, in Ford's defense, they can't make every single thing they want. And they did make it for a while, so it'll be It'd be available.
Yeah, I mean 5 years. It had a 5-year
Yeah.
run, which is
Yeah,
the
no,
same
for
as the
sure.
original GT350 of the 1960s. It ran for 5
Yeah.
years as well. So
Wow. No, it's great. It's beautiful, but those that own them will probably go up in value. So they got that going for them.
Except for those of us who
Yep.
don't. That's okay.
Yeah. The other downside, of course, is that when they launched the GT500 last year, some people complained that you couldn't get it with a manual transmission. It was only available with that 7-speed DCT. And Ford said, yeah, but we still have the GT350, which if you want a manual transmission, they get the GT350, and the GT500 is an automatic. It's like, well, okay, but now the GT350 is going away, and assuming that the Mach 1 is in fact this hybrid, which presumably, it will be the 5-liter Coyote V8 with the 96 horsepower electric motor from the Aviator Grand Touring, which would put it somewhere in the 570 horsepower range, 560 horsepower range. That will be plenty of performance, but that's not going to be available with a manual transmission. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a big deal. Like, I just don't think that many people buy manual transmission, even Mustangs.
It's a purist thing. It's a purist thing. They just want it.
I want it to exist because that's the one I would buy, but I am not buying. So they need to make the cars they can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
Although
they do sell a pretty high percentage of the EcoBoost and the Mustang GTs with manual transmissions. I mean, it's on the order of about over 40%.
Yeah,
manuals.
But in that sense, they can keep those, and they're not losing as much, or they may actually make some money on those cars. When you start to climb the ladder into the expensive stuff, I think that it's a lot harder to sell the higher end Mustangs with manuals in the same amount that you would sell a higher end Mustang with an automatic. It's just it's just reality, because you people, I'm pointing at everybody out there. You people are lazy. You have lazy left feet.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Quarantine car maintenance. And Motor Trend posted an article this week on how to maintain your car for long-term storage. And some of the stuff in here is hopefully your car won't be in long-term storage during this. Hopefully we'll get out of this sooner rather than later. But there's a lot of people right now who are not driving as much as they were previously. A lot of people working from home or sadly not working at all. And, so their cars are sitting idle a lot more than they have in the past. And, while most of this article is relevant, for somebody like me, for example, that, has a car that, I have a car that I don't drive in the wintertime, so I don't drive it from December until about March or so. And I do most of the things that are on this list. There are some things, if you're not driving much right now, that they're still worth keeping an eye on. Most notably with your tires. If your car is sitting idle or mostly idle for the better part of a month or more, if your car is not going anywhere for a while, it's definitely a good idea to check your tires. Keep checking your tires regularly. I mean, you should be checking your tire pressures every month anyway, and preferably every week. But if your wheels aren't rolling, when your car, when you put weight on your tires, they aren't completely round. They deform, from that weight because they have some elasticity to them. And if your car is sitting idle for a long time, the tires will eventually flat spot. They will harden, and that can cause balance problems and other issues with your tires. So it's a good idea, at the very least, to at least move your car around a little bit. Roll it back a couple feet, roll it forward. Just move it so that it's not sitting on the same spot on your tires for an extended period of time. And check the tire pressures to make sure the tire pressures are within spec on a regular basis.
Well, this is interesting. Rebecca, what do you do for your personal cars? Because you've got them stacked up in your driveway. So
yeah. Well, so actually, I think this is a really good time to check and see if your vehicle, or the brand of car you have, has an app. Because I actually can check. I mean, Jake uses Coco, my car, so she is driven on a regular basis. But I can check the tire pressure via the app. So it's something that, if you have a newer car, she's 5 years old, so it's not like it needs to be brand new. Check to see if there's an app available that will help you with some of this stuff. Because as you say, Motor Trend, they also mention, changing your oil, belts and hoses, the battery, things like that. So I think that, this is a great time to now that we have some downtime, most people have some downtime, to say, hey, is my car, how much communication can I do between my car and my phone via an available app, and set that up, because I think it can be really helpful. I know I've gotten notifications of, if a tire is low, it'll come up on the app. And so then, it's that extra, not only should you check, as you said, Sam, but the app can check for you as well.
Yeah, and speaking of oil, I also was talking about the same topic today when I was on Leo Laporte's Tech Guy radio show, and we had an email that came in today from a listener there, from Louis Planenshek, and he was wondering about, he's got a 2019 Camry, and he said it only has 2,000 miles on it, and he's had it for a year. So clearly he obviously wasn't driving it much even before the shelter in place. But his question is, do you still need to change the oil even if it doesn't hit the 10,000 mile mark yet? And modern cars all have oil life monitoring systems in them, and they vary in terms of what they do, but in general, oil change intervals have gotten a lot longer over the years as engines have improved, but also the oil itself has improved, especially with synthetic blends. They last a lot longer. Modern engines don't have as much blow by. One of the reasons you had to change the oil so frequently in the past is, you get gasoline going past the piston rings and mixing with the oil and diluting the oil, so you lost some of the lubricating qualities of it, and you'd get other things in the oil as well. Modern engines don't do that anywhere near as much, so the oil change intervals have gotten longer. And the computers now, that it monitors the way you drive. I mean, if you do a lot of highway driving, steady speeds, that doesn't put as much load on your engine as if you do a lot of urban driving, or depending on if your ambient temperatures where you drive are very high, that has different effects on your oil. And so depending on where you drive and how you drive, your oil change intervals might stretch out, in some cases beyond 10,000 miles, and you'll get an alert on your instrument cluster when it's time to change your oil. In general, I would say it's probably a good idea to change your oil at least once a year. You don't have to do it every 3 months or 3,000 miles like they used to recommend when I was young. But once a year is not bad. And it only costs about $40-$45 to go in for an oil change. So it's a worthwhile investment to do that. And then the other thing is, when you're not driving your car, you want, even if it's not time to change your oil yet, you still want to keep the fluids moving inside your car, because if it's sitting for an extended period of time, the oil that's on the cylinder walls will drain down. Things could potentially seize up. So you want to keep the fluids moving. So, if you're not going anywhere, it's a good idea to once a week just go out in your garage or your driveway, just start up the car, let it run for 5 or 10 minutes, circulate the fluids, make sure everything's working right, and then just shut it off.
I disagree with that. That will help keep the battery charged and stuff, but actually what that does is that puts it, because it doesn't get up to operating temperature, so you actually get a lot more moisture in your oil that way, and it turns the oil acidic. So what I would do if I were storing a car I cared about, which I just leave them in the driveway and just start them, whatever. I think I've the Crown Victoria has suffered a bit. It's still got its 1999 brake fluid in it. But I would actually change the oil. I'd take it out for a run, get it fully warmed up, and then change the oil before I put it away. Then I would disconnect the battery, leave the battery on a battery tender, and not start it. Plug the intake so that rodents don't get in there, and plug the exhaust as well so that rodents don't get in there, and just let it be. And if you have a garage, it might be a good idea to actually put one of those damp rid things in the interior to absorb moisture, and you can that's basically a salt. So you just have to check it every now and then. But I generally, like, the less you do with it, the sort of better off it is. And then when you take it out of storage again, start it, get it running, get it up to temperature, and then change the oil again. You can put it on jack stands as well to get the weight off the tires. That's something that, again, if you're not going to drive it for a long time and you can do it, that's kind of that would be my plan. But I'm not sure about the let it run for.
Well, I mean, if you're just sitting, for a few weeks or a month,
yeah, that's fine. Fire it up, let it idle a little bit,
just move it around a little bit.
Yeah,
and actually,
you don't want the brakes to rust to the rotors and stuff.
Yeah. Right, and don't put on your parking brake. Like with my Miata. When I got my Miata, I actually talked to my friend Richard Truitt, who writes for Automotive News, and he has lots of old cars. He rebuilds old cars, and I asked him for his suggestions. What does he do with his cars? And he's the one who actually suggested to me, going out and just starting it and letting it run, starting it once a week and just letting it run for a few minutes. And that's what he does with his old cars.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think especially too for something with like a carburetor, like, I know he's got Triumphs, right? And a bunch of other stuff.
And some of those are fuel injected.
Okay. I would say that actually for something with a carburetor, it might not be a terrible idea to start it and let it run, just because it keeps fuel running through those things. And the ethanol and the fuel now likes to eat stuff. So that's and it will absorb water. So then you wind up with bigger problems. So actually letting it idle for a little while is not the worst thing in the world. If that acidic oil takes out stuff in the engine, you had a problem anyway. But
yeah. All right. Well, you can read the article for all the other suggestions they have in here. Rebecca has also got another good suggestion of something that's important now in this period when a lot of us are in quarantine or in shutdown with financing and loan support. Rebecca, you want to dive into that?
Yeah, so I've been doing some writing for JD Power, and they're actually really beefing up their coverage of their consumer-oriented coverage. And so there's a list on the JD Power website talking about coronavirus car payment plans. And it details what each manufacturer is doing in terms of either... It's not so much loan forgiveness, it's more like loan deferment. So if you can show that you are impacted in some way, whether it's health-wise or wealth-wise from coronavirus, then a number of manufacturers are offering deferments. They're offering new car incentives, loyalty incentives. It really, it varies across the board. So I wrote the one that was specific for Genesis and Acura, and they were actually really quite different. Mitsubishi's running something different, but it's just a helpful thing. I'll send you guys the link so that you can show it. But, for our listeners that are being impacted by this, there are opportunities for deferment of your payment. And also, it's really actually a pretty good time to buy a car because if you're, again, they're offering loan deferment on new car loans as well. So, Genesis is doing something that's really cool too. If you can, talk to them and show that you're being impacted as a caregiver. So you're not working because you're caring for somebody that has coronavirus, or of course you yourself have it. They're offering loan deferment as well. But I think it's a good thing to note. It's a good thing to know that there is there is help out there if you are being negatively impacted, especially financially.
Yeah, to me the measures they've taken to make it attractive to keep buyers interested are the most amazing things. Like you can really get some crazy terms right now.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and as a finance person, as somebody who used to work at Mercedes-Benz Credit and the FDIC, please don't do an 84-month loan. Just
no,
leave
that's
it
bad
there.
idea. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Like they'll give it to you, but it's a bad idea.
Exactly.
Although that brings us to another listener question. One of the like FCA right now, I think, is offering 0% loans for 84 months. Still, I would, if you can manage the payment on a shorter term loan, it's absolutely a good idea to do that. You want to pay it off sooner rather than later, because if something happens, like if you get into an accident or something, car gets totaled, you could be way underwater on a loan that long, even if your interest is 0%. The value of the car could be significantly less than what you still owe on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, I would say if you can do the 60-month,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people do 72s, and it just, if you just kind of do your best to try and keep it at that 60 months. I know the payment can be very different, but
yeah, but that's the thing. Cars are very expensive, and we've
I know.
extended very generous terms when credit was cheap, and now we're going to see. Right now, credit is still cheap, but I expect at some point we're going to see that really tighten up, and that's going to really squeeze everything. And if you can't really make it work on that 60-month term, then you need to buy less car. Or
Toyota Yaris is a great choice.
Exactly. Like,
that would be my recommendation as well. I mean, I think you need to think very carefully about a 72-month loan.
Yeah, and especially in these times, the reality is that even once we come out of this, the economy is going to be in really bad shape for probably at least the next couple of years,
right?
If not considerably longer than that.
I mean, 60 months is 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a long time,
right? Well,
and what was it like 5 years ago?
And as you say, as Sam mentioned, you're going to be underwater, and so if something happens to that vehicle, you're going to owe more than it's worth, and it's just not a good position to be in.
Or even if even if something doesn't happen to the vehicle, if you were to lose your job, or your circumstances changed and you had to sell that vehicle, now all of a sudden the resale value of that vehicle is probably going to be less than what it's worth for quite some time.
Right. Absolutely. You're vulnerable for quite a long time that you have that loan. Obviously as you get into 48 months, then you start, if you got a year left to pay on it on a 60-month, then you're probably well ahead, probably. But again, it's just, cars they're not assets, they're investment. They're an expense. And so I just don't want people to be falsely lured into the idea that a 72 or 84 month is okay, because I think that that's something that is, you really need to live a little bit more within your means.
Yeah, it's tough, and there's, gap protection is there. There are ways you can be smart about it. We're clearly not financial experts. I mean, we're car writers, for Christ's sake. But
I did work with the FDIC, though.
Yeah, that's true. These are things like,
but no.
But seriously, like it is true. Like the longer you stretch out that period, the sort of worse it looks for affordability. You really can't predict that you're going to have that stable income for that period of time, and you do wind up with the resale value not matching your payments, or what you owe on it after a short term.
Sure. But do check out. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I wasn't going to say anything all that useful.
Well, let's finish up with one the rest of this particular email. It was from Randy Guerrero. We mentioned I think last week when we were talking about the Gladiator, about the resale value and quality of the Jeep brand, and he says considering a Jeep Compass Limited and wondered if we've reviewed this model or what your thoughts are on it. That he likes the size, fuel mileage, and price for 4-wheel drive. Plus, they're offering 0% for 84 months. definitely stay away from the 84-month loan if you can manage the payments on a shorter
Yeah,
term.
I don't think they're going to offer you 0% on a shorter term. Maybe they will. I forget. I was looking at these briefly.
Yeah,
Still
you
generous
have to look
terms.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, additional question is hearing what the stimulus package that there will be incentives in the future for dealers to get people to buy new cars. Wondering if I should wait or this may be a rumor. Big fan of the show and enjoys the podcast and discussion of iRacing, and he's a big NASCAR fan. So let me hit that last part of it first.
The
The
NASCAR
stimulus
fan part?
package. No, the stimulus part of it. There has been some discussion about doing another cash for clunkers style program. Right now, there are no incentives in there for buying new vehicles. This would be a separate thing that Congress has not done anything about yet, which would be some sort of a trade-in program to get people to trade in older cars to buy new vehicles. We don't know if this is going to happen or not. So depending on if you need to buy a new car right now, then don't wait assuming that this is going to happen. If you don't need to buy this Jeep right now, then maybe hold off for a while, see how things go, see if things, get a little better. And then you may have that opportunity to do it. As far as the Compass goes, I drove a Compass a couple of years ago and did a review on Forbes, which we'll link in the show notes. And I think Dan, you and I talked about it here on the show fairly on. I'll find that episode and link that as well. Have you guys driven the Compass?
I have, yes. The newer one is so much better than the previous one that I think that if you're contemplating, to say, like, if you're looking and saying, okay, I'm not so sure about, whether I want to spend this money right now, or maybe I'll look at it used, just don't. That's all. Just please don't do that. I think the new one is great. I had a lot of fun with it. It actually snowed when I had it, and it was great. And it was delightful. I mean, I didn't write a formal review on Rebecca Drives, but I remember writing some things on Instagram, and it's just a good car. I like the size of it a lot. I think that it's well behaved. It's got that fun kind of Jeep feel to it. And, again, I think the biggest thing is just that the previous one was terrible. This one, I think, is really good.
I agree with that. I think that this is one of my favorite Jeeps, actually, is the Compass, because it offers you a lot of what you get in something like the Grand Cherokee or the Cherokee. Just that really nice car-like, comfortable Jeep atmosphere. In a really tidy size. It drives really well. I think it's related to the 500X, which I also really
no.
like. Oh, it's not.
No, I don't think so.
They were both compact US wide. Maybe I'm thinking of the Renegade.
The Renegade is on the same chassis as 500X. This is based on the Cherokee, smaller version of the Cherokee platform.
Okay. Either way, like, it was such a quantum shift from the original Compass, which was not good.
Not good.
I like it a lot, but I think that while we are a podcast that we focus a good amount of our attention on new cars, and we get to drive the new cars, and that's all fun, and we want the manufacturers to be successful, so they can continue to enable our fun thing here. It's not necessarily the best time to even contemplate buying a car. So I would suggest look seriously at, are you stable? Do you think that you're going to be stable? And what's that payment going to be? And what, do you have money saved up? Is it better to keep that money saved up? If you're sitting on some cash, you might want to stay sitting on some cash. And this is
at
one
least
of the
for
things,
a couple more months.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I think is actually going to become more important in our culture, right? We had a consumer culture for a very, very long time. And we're having right now a very large shock to the system. And I expect, if economy-wise we enter a period where of recession, the maintenance culture is going to sort of have a renaissance. And so you're going to see people fixing stuff that they normally don't. You're going to see people keeping cars even longer. We already keep cars for 12 years on average. So look at what you've got and what it needs, and maybe just put the money into that in case, things hit the skids and you might need that money for something else. A car is a fun thing to spend money on. It's not necessarily a wise thing to spend money on. I know that seems really, really strange for us to say, but we want you listeners to be able to eat.
That's right.
I feel like a dad now.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that's great advice, and I agree 100%, so as Rebecca said, if you can manage, if you do need to buy something right now, if you can manage the payments on a shorter term loan, that's always a better thing to do. And then, if you can wait a little bit, that's probably a really wise thing to do right under the current circumstances.
I mean, I think the Jeep dealer would be happy to give you a very good price on a Compass right now today.
Absolutely. And if you do decide to buy, the Compass is a great, compact utility.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah. And even, if you're going for the higher end, like the Trailhawk, if you want something with serious off-road chops, I mean, Rebecca and I have both driven, the Compass Trailhawk.
That was a riot
at the Chrysler Chelsea Proving Grounds, on our off-road trail. I mean, this is a vehicle that can go almost anywhere. It's very, very capable.
It was shocking how good it was.
It's just too bad you can't really put a plow on it. There is a small plow that would probably work. But I don't know.
My gosh, it would probably look really cute.
It'd be awesome.
Like a Betty Crocker kitchen plow.
All right.
My first snow plow. All right. Well,
Okay.
We had a bunch of other questions.
Yeah, but I think we've been going for about 2 hours now.
We have.
Gosh, wow.
I think that's good for this week.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'll tear through the questions on the Twitters then, so that people don't feel left out, and maybe we can address them next week. Does that sound like a plan?
It sounds
like
great.
a good plan.
All right. Perfect.
Stay safe and stay healthy, everybody. And if you got a couple of minutes to spare, shoot us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen that you can rate us on. And see you next time.
Yeah, stay in touch. We're gonna go bake bread now.
Stay healthy.
Yep.
Cheers.
All right. Bye.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.